Well, good morning on this November 15th. It's a cloudy day, but we are lucky to have the brightness that is the wisdom of Reverend Dennis Reynolds with us. So we are talking about his service titled Abundant Love. And I think Connie wanted to go first.
When you said Q, is that question?
Oh, a cue, like a line, like,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I have one, but first of all, I want to say to Dennis, that was one of the most moving services, and my cup is so full, I can't even believe it. So thank you. The first thing I would like us maybe to speak about or talk about is the line that Dennis said when he was holding his baby grandchild. And he said for him, this was one of his most spiritual grounding practices. So I thought, wow, that's a lead in to all of us to reflect on our own. Like what practice do we have that grounds us?
Yeah.
Well, I'm clearly going to need to be looking at some more because that grandchild and his parents are flying back to South Africa on Thursday.
Oh, no.
No.
How nice that you were able to experience this period of life.
Yep,
Yeah,
he's
the
been here
beginning.
for 6 months, and we've done some good bonding that I'm hoping will pay off over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They hope to be back next summer, and we're looking at about every other year. We think we can afford to go there once travel gets a little easier. But part of the reason, I mean, they're going back because his dad's 6-month temporary visa expires, but also COVID rates are much lower there than they are here. And so health-wise, it's safer, as well as they're going home.
Mhm.
So Dennis, what town do they live near or in?
They live in a small suburb of Cape Town called Muizenberg.
Ah,
It's
okay.
a little beach community. It's a lovely, lovely place. If I could afford it, I'd spend winters there regularly if I could get there without airplane guilt.
That's great.
So
And
is their weather about the same as ours?
No, it's San Diego kind of weather.
Hmm.
It's
Oh, it's really, really south. I mean, it's
Yeah.
California. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think Connie's question is a very valid and valuable one of what spiritual practices ground us, or what practices become spiritual for us. I think that is that an okay summary of what you asked, Connie?
Mhm.
And so I've written that into the chat, and maybe we can go to that if there are no questions. But before we do that, Laura Lee wanted to say something.
Well, I just was going to compliment Randy, and I appreciated his talk today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Dennis, Reverend Dennis.
Dennis.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
okay.
Yeah. That's
I'm
all right.
old.
I
I'm
know,
old.
it's okay. All right. You don't
Just
have
a
to
number, Laura Lee.
All right, cool. Are there any questions just for the get-go? No? Okay, well let's
Only just to say, well and good, Dennis, but it isn't easy. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say how much I appreciated the focus on the universalism, because I don't think a lot of people who might be attending our church presently, I mean, us old people that have been around a while have understand all of that. And I was even in the church in Washington, D.C., where that was consecrated back in '61. So, but I appreciated the fact that universalism, that unabiding faith in everyone is good, and love is for all, and redemption is quote unquote is for all. And I think I was perhaps, my mother's family must have had some of that in there, because that's basically what I heard as a young person growing up.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Laleen.
Before we get into the topic,
I'd like to kind of get maybe the some of the group. There were two things, Reverend Dennis, that you did that I thought would be incredible as a video link piece on our new website. And the first was your explanation of the chalice. It was really excellent. It was short and tight and clear. And the second was the difference between Unitarian Universalists and Unitarians.
Mhm.
So I'd like to hear from other people, how you think about that. And Dennis,
Mhm.
from you, if that's something that you would willing to participate in and have on our website.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a version of that, or Michael, you could look and see how it works as simply
Yeah.
a cut and paste about as what's there.
Yeah, I could clip it if the group, thinks that's a good idea. I appreciated the whole service, but yeah, that's a valuable bit for our history,
Those two pieces, I think, just clipped are absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly. I thought about that too, Laleen. Thank you for bringing that up, because I'm all for helping people have knowledge that helps them deal with just the receiving of information, so that knowledge base is very important.
Yeah.
It is important, and we sometimes forget that not everyone is a visual learner. We have so many auditory learners, and the more short, videos that people can click on, the more we accommodate a wider range of people in learning more about who we are and what we do.
Yeah. Laura Lee wanted to say one more thing.
I just wanted to reiterate, I really appreciate it as a new, I may be old, but then I'm still a new Unitarian Universalist Congregationist. Anyway, and so the history and the combination was very informative and very enlightening to me. And I really appreciated that.
Mhm.
Like I say, as a newcomer to the church.
Yeah, it's a rich history,
Yeah.
so yeah. Okay. We've been joined by Lucy. I don't know, let's see, Lucy, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine.
Awesome. Okay, great.
I'm just not visually presentable.
You're always presentable.
Oh.
Okay, well, let's dive in a little bit to Connie's question, because I think that'll be really interesting for us. And does anybody want to answer, or do I call on people? Roll up my teacher sleeves. Go ahead,
What
Sharon.
was the question?
Okay, yeah, good thing. Sharon, we'll go first, but what are the spiritual practices, or the practices that ground us spiritually, I guess would be a better way to put it. Go ahead, Sharon. It's all
For
you.
me, it's music.
Hmm.
And I like the regular songs, hymns that are included in our services. And I always sing along,
Mhm.
even if we're not together.
Mhm.
Right now, my brain is hiccuping. I can't think of the names of those particular ones.
Yeah, well, there was the meditation on breathing, and
That was good.
yeah, and then
There was more love somewhere.
there's more love. Thank you. Oh, geez. Yeah.
Go lift it up.
Of course, Go Lift It Up is what we always leave our
Yeah.
at the end. And it's hard for me at the end, if I'm service leader, not to break out into song right there
Yeah.
in the pulpit.
I
I've
Okay.
almost done that several times.
go ahead, Sharon. Yeah.
For me, it's Spiritual Life and Go Lift It Up. And then the song today that had the soprano descant.
Mhm.
That
There is more
Breathing.
love. There's
Yeah.
more love.
no, it was the inhale. and
Breathing.
Oh,
exhale.
meditation on breathing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that was
Great.
it. Thank you.
Great. Oh, and Dennis, this is your hour, so anytime you have something to interject, just come right in. You don't.
I have the capacity to unmute myself.
Yeah.
I would just add at this point in time that I find there are some of the small congregations I've done some work with, the consistent opening and closing music was very, very important.
Oh
And
yeah.
in Eugene, for many years, Spirit of Life was part of Sunday service every Sunday.
Yeah.
And many have called that the anthem of Unitarian Universalism.
Right.
I think she was kind of surprised when it became that. Carolyn McDade, who wrote the piece, kind of went, "Oh, you like my music."
Well, there
Very
was,
much.
yeah, there was an article about the Spirit of, I guess maybe that would be a good one to share with the community. Yeah, there was a wonderful article about that song, about the history of it and how much it's affected Unitarian Universalist culture. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, and I think it captured that sense that some of us who came out of traditions where that word God
Mhm.
had a negative and judgmental connotation, to find other words
Mhm.
that call what some people call the mystery or the unnameable.
Mhm.
And so, Spirit of Life is another phrase for divinity or that which we can't clearly define.
Right.
And so I think that's part of what speaks to Unitarian Universalists in particular.
Yeah, good point. All right. Who's next? Oh, yep. How about JC and then Glennis?
Relative to the concept of practice and its grounding, I don't know if it's the other side of the coin or what, but the other way for me to look at it is, what do I often do instead of other things? Because what I actually do is my practice. And so when I'm doing something that I don't actually honor, like over an hour of game playing, I need to understand that as that's presenting itself to me as my practice. How do I feel about that? And etc. I mean, that whole line of thought goes way beyond or way around the other way from what Connie wants. And now I'll try and see if I can actually add something to that conversation.
Yeah. Glennis.
When it comes to grounding, I find it somewhat difficult because my mind is always, you know, it's hard to ground. But I do find that meditation, and I especially, Dennis, absolutely love the breathe in, breathe out meditation. I did that at the GA in 2019. It was amazing. With the whole group of everybody. But anyway, so that grounds me, as does playing music. But I find that playing music has an effect of both connecting me with the other world and grounding me. So that's in itself is one of the things that, because I have to, my mind is stepping aside, you know, but I'm still working my fingers and working the music. So I find that one of the more interesting ways to stay grounded. So through meditation and music, and then if I really, really, really want to be grounded, I will exercise or garden.
Well put. Lois and then Lillian.
Yeah, I can agree with Glennis in the first two things, but not the exercise and gardening. I'm really bad at that. But I do like to sit down at the piano, and I will catch myself going to I've got a hymnal here and also a couple of other books of Unitarian music. And I really like to go through them and listen to them. And sometimes I'll go to YouTube and listen to other groups playing the same and singing the same songs. Yeah, music is universal for all of us. There's another thing I do is after meals, I tend to sit at the table and I just look at nothing and think about nothing and talk about grounding. That will do that. You just do nothing, just be in the moment. And it is really nice to feel that just a few minutes, sometimes maybe 5-6 minutes. It does really good for calming calming me, anything that has gone on, just to do nothing.
Mm.
And as far as for the music, I'd like to find another version of Go Lift It Up.
Mm.
I catch myself singing that to try to bring some more life to it. It seems as though they sing it just note for note without thinking about it.
Okay.
Yeah, music. It's got to be music.
Great.
Yeah.
And Laleen.
I have two practices that I've used for years and years. And they both follow breathe in, breathe out. They got started as healing practices. When I first got lupus and my body would just get so inflamed and just heat up. I remembered a place many, many, many years ago that I had found on Molokai Island that was a waterfall falling into a pool. And because the island at that point in time was kind of off limits because of all of the diseased people, there was almost no one there except maybe natives, who lived on the island. So for a long time I was there and I just had this water, dropping on my head and moving down through my body. And so that's a healing, and I'm elaborating a little bit because if you all have arthritis or any of those kinds of things, it's amazing just to imagine water entering here and just going around absolutely every vertebrae and every joint. And you'll find you can really, if you have fevers, just bring them down, or if you have inflammation, you can calm it down. And then the other one that I've used came out of a surprise I found way back in 1979 in a little spot on some private land here in Oregon. I call it my Christmas tree orchard. And it was just this little space that had been a clearing, and a number of fir trees ranging in height from about 2 feet up to maybe 3 or 4 feet had, taken root. And it was very private and sunny, and it was a beautiful day. And I didn't know I had lupus yet. So I just took off all my clothing and I just laid there in the sun and allowed that sun just to warm my body. And that's morphed in over the last 40 years to, drawing in a universal healing light, and using that as a part of almost every meditation. And feeling myself just cleansed and an inner light of peace and warmth and safety and security filling my body, and then just kind of open it. So I guess I'm a more visual, tactile combination kind of person than listening to a piece of music. Never thought about it that way, but music is not a part of it, except my own music.
Julianne.
I've been listening to everyone else's grounding experiences or practices. Mine is cooking. And I don't mean just cooking a meal. It's one of my marathon 100-quart applesauce canning projects. Today it's quince jam. You have to stand and stir, and you can't leave the pot. And this will go on for hours. And it's a wonderful space. The whole rest of the world dissolves. And I am here doing my thing.
That's beautiful.
Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher, would describe how we stir is how are we being mindful as we do it, and to be in that present moment. You will hear me quoting him a lot because he's my teacher's teacher. And one book that was sitting on my desk right now is Present Moment, Wonderful Moment, Mindful Verses for Daily Living. And he has like verses about taking out the compost, to know that compost can in fact nurture the next generation of fruits and flowers. And so as you contemplate, it's almost like, I don't know if you remember Karate Kid, wipe on, wipe off.
Right.
Yeah.
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 But so can stirring be a practice.
And there is a ceremony in Sikhism where they're creating the amrit. It's a sugar water spice concoction, and they use a sword to stir it. And the way that you stir it is very there's a prescribed way to do it. So that's interesting that both of you would bring up stirring metaphors. So yeah, cool. Am I missing anybody? Who was next?
Well, I may I just,
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with everything everyone is saying. And it's so wonderful to hear how each person approaches this. Music, of course, has been my life forever, although I'm not as gifted as some, but I really enjoy just being me. And I allow myself to be me at my house all the time, much to the chagrin of Joe. But singing, and I remember when I was new to the Unitarian Church in Southern California, I hadn't really been an active member at UU for a long time, and I was remembering losing a very dear friend of many years to a dastardly cancer death, and I was in Seattle visiting my son's home, and I went to the coast, which was about 10 minutes away from the house, and sat on a log at high tide or low tide, I guess it was. Yeah, low tide, because I was way out there. And I just sang Spirit of Life to the highest of my being that I possibly could. I'm sure people going past probably thought I was nuts, but I was way out there. And it had such a, just of course, a sense of loss with this dear, dear friend. It was my first peer that I lost. Now as we get older, we're getting not used to, but there's more and more peers that we're losing. This is my first peer that I lost. And I just found that the words to that song and the process of sitting on that log and just being there and just letting this grief roll out of me and the tears rolling down my cheeks. And I just kept singing and singing until I couldn't sing anymore. So that was a major, major healing. And I'm very grateful for that. That particular piece of music has meant a lot to me over time. So thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah, it's amazing what that some music is kind of like companions to us in the most difficult times. Kim.
Well, I've learned how to talk to God a lot since I moved here. And music is both is a two-edged sword for me. It makes me really sad, but it also makes me really happy. And I do play a lot of piano and guitar playing and singing to make me happy. There's certain songs that really make me sad, but yet makes me happy too. So it's kind of a two-edged sword.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And thank you for that.
It's an interesting piece when you talk about, how we talk to the divine, however we label that. My wife, Suzanne, was raised Unitarian and then eventually Unitarian Universalist. And she has had for 40 plus years, probably 50 now, a meditation practice. For me, I'm still, very young in that kind of formalized practice. My practice used to be running marathons. Long distance running was very meditative for me. I've been a little too hyper most of my life to just sit and breathe. And she was asked when she was doing a chaplaincy residency to offer a blessing of communion for a family whose family member was dying. She was working in a hospice as a chaplain intern. And she finally figured out, as she described it, prayer is meditation with words. Because she has prayed, one might describe it, in silence for 50 years. other than we begin or end with a metta prayer, our time of meditation is silent. And silence can be a prayer.
Mhm.
Or a prayer can be meditation.
Yeah. But of course, you know, Kim, you're talking about, you know, that communing with a loving Father, Creator, God. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'm actually God. He
I'm sorry.
talks back some.
You talk. Right. And JC, did your hand go up? Was that, am I seeing that? Yes? Okay. Oh.
I'm realizing that this whole topic may be something I'm about to choose, because I was reading a, what do you call it? A woman's story of her life, Requiem, whatever. And I got the feeling, I feel very safe in my mind, but my body is always trying to participate. And so as I'm reading this woman's book about her life, my body gives me the feeling that her story is coming into me, and how much I do that. I bring what's out in, and I think about it, and my body is saying, when are you ever going to turn your inness out? When is it going to be your story that you are telling? And then it went back to sleep. So I can see that I've made a practice of caring about what's out here, even if it's a game. It's to win it or to figure it out so that the game works out. And so I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, I don't have the words. So thank you for that last bit, because maybe if I would just sit with open mind and heart and body, the words would come eventually. If I gave it the space to be heard, at least. So, yeah, I think maybe that might be where I need to be. So I'm glad for the whole morning experience.
Yes. Lucy wanted to add something.
Yeah, grounding always brings to mind literally, I like to say nature's my religion, earth is my temple, but literally taking my shoes off and going out and putting my feet in the earth, in the dirt, in the earth. I get a lot of energy or peace from that. I can kind of sum up my triple A's: aspiration, animals, and art. Aspiration meaning the meaning of the breathing. I use the breathing exercise meditation quite a bit to deal with my chronic pain and also anxiety. The animals goes to the nature. Anytime I can be with animals is just simply it's like resetting your computer. It just puts me back to the perfect place. And then art, just being able to pick up a pen and start drawing or doodling with something or that, whatever you want to call that. So those are my 3 A's that get me through the day.
Yeah.
And they all have a spiritual quality to them for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would think anything creative, where something didn't exist before and now it exists because of you, is, inherently kind of like a divine action in a way, because like mimicking the process of creation.
Yeah.
No, am I alone in that?
No,
No, okay.
that's for sure.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
And Paul wanted to go next.
Yeah, as far as grounding goes, I spent half of my life living next to the beach, and I found sitting on the sand, just gazing out over the waves, was very grounding for me. And it was a very enjoyable practice. I used to walk down to the beach all the time. Over the last few years, though, I've moved more and more inland and don't have that opportunity like I used to. But I found that I've become a sky watcher. And looking at the sky at night, especially, and seeing the stars has been very, very centering for me, because it kind of gives perspective about the universe and how we are all part of something much larger. And I think that's a very, very good practice, for at least for me. I enjoy watching clouds too.
That's good.
Yeah.
By the way, I heard that there was we could see all the planets in the next couple of days.
Oh wow!
One of the rare times. It was on some feed on CNN that I got. So I don't know exactly when or where, but they're in the sky. Something during twilight and something during all day the evening. But all planets will be visible.
Yeah.
Somewhere behind those clouds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all going to be lined up on one side of the solar system.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh.
Very rare occurrence.
Interesting.
But I don't know when.
Yeah, Connie, I was actually going to come to you.
Well, this is a different thing I want to bring up with with Dennis. And that is, I guess my question to Dennis is, when did you, as a child or whatever, when did you first start feeling that the ideas of damnation and punishment and hell and all of those things didn't fit into your life?
Well, I guess the piece I'd put out there is when I was about 12, I found out about it later. My parents stopped going to church because there was an incident where the pastor who had been preaching all this judgment for every Sunday ran off with the church secretary.
Yeah.
And my parents knew hypocrisy when they saw it. And it was a challenge to their faith, and they stopped going not because it had happened, but that the church elders sort of denied that it had happened. And they, pushed it aside and wouldn't acknowledge anything about it. But for a couple more years, they sent us kids. And I realized partially they just wanted the kids out of the house for some time away.
Yeah.
They wanted to get rid of us on Sunday morning. But then at about 14, my parents allowed me to not go anymore because I wasn't finding it very helpful. As a teenager, I felt haunted by those ghosts.
Yeah.
And then when I was 16 years old, a friend of mine in high school said, we have this really cool youth group at our church. You should come sometime. And I'm going, I don't know if I want to go to church. And he says, come check it out. I don't think it's what you think about church. And it was an organization called Liberal Religious Youth of the Unitarian Universalists. So things began to shift for me in a more formalized way then. I got to admit that from 21 to 45, I hardly set foot in any church other than for a wedding or a memorial or something like that. And then returned at a time in my life when I needed a lot more grounding, and came back to UU because I had learned as a younger person what could be there in terms of a supportive community that didn't come with a bunch of judgment. So that's kind of the, short story of how it came for me. But I struggled for a number of years. And as I mentioned in passing in the sermon, I still feel some of those judgmental ghosts are still embedded in there, in spite of some good psychotherapy to try to keep them at a distance. And it was important for me personally to study Christian scripture in seminary. But I did so in a Unitarian Universalist seminary, and my professor was a former Nazarene who understood, what that process of re-examining those teachings in a different frame. And so I came to a place where I could embrace that universalist loving core of Judeo-Christian teaching. As part of what I go to for spiritual grounding, where I spent a lot of years pushing that as far away as I could, instead of realizing I could hold it like this. I worked with a spiritual director for a while who was also a Reiki massage therapist, and we worked on a lot of physical metaphors. And I try to be this as much as I can. For a lot of my life, I spent it like this or like this. That there's, we don't have to do as much of this or of this. We can spend more of our time, more open to see what might emerge from a whole array of sources.
Yeah.
I used to describe myself as a one with a Christian tradition, a Buddhist-oriented religious naturalist. And I discovered I could just call myself a Unitarian Universalist, and it covers all those bases.
That's awesome. I come at it from a slightly, well, I don't know if it's different than your conception, Dennis, but I believe strongly that hell is real. Hell is absolutely real. And I've seen it and I've been there. Hell to me are parents selling their children for drugs. Hell is the tormenting grief that we go through when we lose someone, and so the example of all of the saviors, but we are a fundamentally a Christian culture.
Yeah, I can't talk now. Would you tell her? I'll call her back.
So the example of Jesus is that through forgiveness, through compassion, we can transcend hell and death.
Well, and I think you touch on that notion of, the Jesus seminars and what part of what became Christian teachings are the teachings attributed to the Rabbi Jesus. And what's the stuff that's been constructed by those that followed. I mean, my own bias is beginning with Paul, who never met the guy,
right.
But is elevated to the same kind of status of apostlehood as are those who hung out with Jesus, the disciples, the teachers. So whether it's Thomas and those who were in the Gnostic Gospels that were hidden away in caves, or those who were part of the canon. So, I think you're right that there certainly is hell on earth.
Yeah.
There are hellish situations that are all too often created by human beings, not by some all-powerful judgmental out there.
Right.
One of my important mentors, my Bruce Bodie, who was my intern supervisor, talked about the commonality of liberal religions. Plural is faith in human capacity, which means it's not all somebody out there, but it's what I do is part of it at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
I certainly agree with this. We make our own heaven or hell right here on earth while we're living, and we live in it, and it goes back and forth all the time, depending on our moods and what we say and how we act. Yeah, heaven or hell is very real.
Yeah.
But as we were talking about different scenarios, and Paul, you were talking about the ocean, and when you look at the ocean, how calming it is, and the heavens, how we realize how small we are, and yet we're a part of everything. I think about myself when I go into a grove of trees, tall trees, and I see them up there, and I think how holy it is, and how protected I feel, and how beautiful it is. That's a little bit of heaven right there. Just to be around this life that is all around us, and it is not eternal, but it is so long living. It's just beautiful and very, very calming.
And our Unitarian Universalists, the Transcendentalists of Emerson and Thoreau, lifted up that sense of turning to nature that Paul described as waves and sky, and you describe of trees. And that's that religious naturalism that I, sometimes would use as a label. And I think for lots of us, we are blessed to live in a part of the planet where that, opportunity to commune deeply with nature is so readily available to us.
Yeah. I've often said that you would be hard pressed to find a place as naturally beautiful as the Pacific Northwest is. Yeah. Yeah. Martha.
Coming from the Midwest, where everything is flat as a pancake, except if there was a glacial moraine in the area where I lived on top of one.
Right.
But when I first moved here, I had the opportunity of climbing up Watson Falls, and it was one of my first experiences with a waterfall. Just the sights and the sounds and the ethereal, just the whole thing. And Joe's taking pictures, and I'm just, his form of meditation is doing something like that because he sees things that way, and mine is taking it all in. And I said, if there is a heaven, this is the kind of place I think it would be like.
Right.
And then to climb to the top, a bunch of us got up there first, and it was all cloudy and the water's coming down and we're just getting all wet from the mist. It was just wonderful. And Joe shows up later because he was so busy taking photographs. And as he shows up, the skies parted and the sun came out. So he got the perfect shot of the waterfall. So, I mean, talk about examples of divine intervention. I don't know, but it really was quite touching.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful experience. So
well, think about this, right? Think about the Disneyland rides where it's made to look like various landscapes, and they spent so much money constructing like a fake mountain that you can go under you can go underneath a waterfall, and how as a child that was like so exciting. And then to come to Oregon and find out that you don't have to spend billions of dollars to make the fake mountain, that you can actually just go around the real mountain is quite special, I think. So JC, sorry.
Just to keep you all up with what all is developing over here on this chair. I realize that I do have a meditative center, and it's Mount Rainier as seen from Seattle.
Yes.
Because the house I grew up in had a balcony overlooking east and south, and not quite so well to the north. But I remember as being not as high as the railing of the balcony and going every day somehow out there on the balcony and looking for the mountain. And I learned incredible things, like I can't see it today, but I know it's there. And it's as wonderful unseen as it is seen, because I can conjure it up. And then I remember, move ahead 20 years, and I'm coming home from the East on an airplane, from college on an airplane. And there are several of us from Seattle. And so we're doing sort of a cook's tour from the air. And finally, the pilot says, will everyone please sit down and quit moving from one side of the plane to the other? I will promise you, I will now fly around every mountain we come to. And starting at Sun Valley, he did that. He flew around so that both sides could see the mountain. While what we realized was we who grew up in Seattle finally knew we were coming home because of the mountains. And the mountains were still there. And then Mount St. Helen has the blow up, for heaven's sakes. But even that, there's a lesson there. The mountain blew up, but it's still there. But, you know, so I'm realizing, okay, right. I do know how to get to this space we're talking about, Connie. I just need some of the wonderful pictures of mountains that there are and go back to being 5 years old and realizing that the mountain there, I mean, whenever we see on television, whatever this show we're looking at is taking place in Seattle because there's the mountain. And that energy rising in me is telling me, you care about that. So start there. You don't have to have a special thing. That is your special thing. So thank you. This has been a wonderful time. Thank you, Connie, for suggesting that we probably do have a grounding device within our lives. And thank you, Dennis, for just saying things again and again from different points of view so that I paid attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess
we're ready for a wrap up, Michael. I found a reading I'd like to offer as a closing piece.
I love it. I love it. Real quick before we adjourn, I would like to encourage everyone here to reach out to other congregation members with the specific intent of perhaps bringing them in to the Zoom meetings. I sent out an email saying that I'd be willing to help with any, and I didn't get much of a response. So I really would love it. I love this group, you know, but there are some lost sheep out there. So that was a joke. That was a joke. Okay. Yeah. Dennis, thank you so much for giving us this time, and I would love to hear your wrap up.
Yeah, what I would suggest is that sometimes those sacred items that invite us to greater depth around the mystery can be the size of a mountain, or it can be much smaller. And I'd like to share a poem from Mary Oliver, who many came to call St. Mary of Beacon Street.
Yes.
Because Beacon Street Press, the Unitarian Universalist Press, has been her major publisher. She's not a Unitarian Universalist, but we get credit for putting her into print. It's the summer day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? The grasshopper. I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who's eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is your plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Wow. Fantastic.
Awesome.
All right. Well, take that with you for the rest of the day and the rest of the week, and we will meet again next Sunday. Thank you all for joining, and bless you, and see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.